I spent primary school years in a military school in Germany. So I went from the very first class through to basically the last class, or the last but one class, which is a long time in a military school in one place. And not many other people, my friends would change every 6 months. Because if you're in the army, you travel with your family. Your family travels with you largely, unless you're going off to war. Sometimes, generally, if that happens, you're back in the home country, as it were. But in the British Army, anyway. But it's an interesting one. But like I say, I just think that there are quite a few words that I say that people say, well, that's mispronounced, and it's just how I say it. My sisters are the same.
Yeah, I think Roger Lewis from Wales is, for me, a bit of a Gallic thing.
Well, I guess so. With a middle name like Glinda, I couldn't be much help.
Is it Glinda? I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, Glinda, no vowels.
Is that as in Glyndyr?
DWR.
Glyndwr.
Yeah.
Glinda. Yeah, because I remember when I lived in Spain, when I met people from Galicia, some of the characteristics that I got told about and I saw in action were that they would answer a question with another question. And yeah,
I don't know what you mean.
I'm not suggesting that that's something that you particularly do, but I know that you are a fan of better questions. Then the other thing was they would say, or people said about the Galicians, and I noticed this too, that they don't actually speak, they sing.
Okay.
Which is a little bit like what people think of the Italians, bitty bitty bitty. Yeah. I don't really know.
I mean, I do think language and culture is really wrapped up in each other. There's no separating it. Right down to dialects and accents, and not just whole language. The idea of the standardized human being is just ridiculous. The maximization and modification of humanity is the most ridiculous thing ever.
One size fits all, old chap.
Yeah. It's got to be one of the biggest ignoble lies. It's noble, ignoble, unnoble. Yeah. This election business, Ranjan, is hotting up.
I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to ignore it completely, but I suppose in some ways, I managed to get some sleep last night. Didn't get too sucked into it.
I watched the film yesterday. It's what I've been aware of. I hadn't watched it. It's called Everything's a Rich Man's Trick.
Everything's what?
A Rich Man's Trick. I mean, the title is Everything's a Rich Man's Trick, from JFK to 9/11. And it's quite an interesting film. It's basically the mafia connections to the assassination of Kennedy, which I do think are absolutely correct, but also the mafia connections to the CIA. And all the drug running stuff, and it's actually it's quite a good film in terms of piecing together some of the bits and pieces surrounding that corruption. Personally, I think it overstates its case a bit, but it is an interesting take on things. I think David's stuff on money laundering. I think if you're aware of sort of his writing about money laundering, you'll get a better idea of because it jumps to a few conclusions, and it posits it from a particularly from one particular viewpoint, which I'm not saying, from that viewpoint, I think its conclusions are perfectly valid, but it's actually a little bit more subtle than the film comes down with. But in 3.5 hours, it does a pretty good job, because that is a long film, but it's a big subject.
And what it's talking about, the role of the mafia in various things that have gone on.
Yes. Well, in the Bay of Pigs, because the casinos in Cuba were basically run by the mafia, and the quid pro quo for mafia assistant in electing John F. Kennedy, which is undoubted, that's absolutely correct. That did happen, and Joe Kennedy was basically a monster. He was really, what he really was a front guy. He was. If you read David's stuff about money laundering, you kind of get it, and that's Joseph Kennedy. That was really his role. Like David says, it's the men in suits that launder the drug money rather than the drug pushers. And of course, those guys are all expendable. And so it's very good on patsies, fall guys and stuff like that.
Do they mention Howard Hunt?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, because I'm pretty confident that there'd be a range of parallels
They
going on.
mentioned the plane crash that his wife died in.
Sorry?
Hunt's wife was killed in a plane crash.
After he died?
No, before he died.
Oh, okay, that's unfortunate.
Well, there are quite a few plane crashes that happened that weren't accidents. And, apparently that one wasn't either. But it like I say, it's a very good film. It's got some very solid stuff in it. The other thing that it also says is that all the other JFK films are made by the CIA as part of the sort of Operation Mockingbird type of thing.
Ah, okay. So Oliver Stone, what do you reckon?
Well, this film reckons that it's a CIA production. I mean, it was a mainstream Hollywood release, and so well, it's an interesting one at the moment, because that then begs the question: is the Chinese ownership of so much of Hollywood now also a CIA operation? And of course, I think some people would probably answer that and sort of say, well, the CIA become a bit column. But it's the links to the Nazis, because it goes right the way back, you see, this film. And it's very good in that it says, right, we're going to start with JFK, but before we do that, we've got to do a history lesson. And so it talks about Schacht, who was Hitler's financier, and his connection to ThyssenKrupp, and ThyssenKrupp's connection to Brown Brothers Harriman, and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it also touches on the Russian walkie factory, which basically ran on Ford engine plants and stuff like that. So that's a linkage again of the the East Coast financiers that wanted the Bolshevik Revolution. The whole, I mean, you know, both sides against the middle, all of this sort of thing. That's a very good arms dealing film. Shadow World, it's called. That came out a couple of years ago. That's on my BitChute channel, actually, Shadow World. And that again is very well worth watching. But the fictional movie, The International, it still remains one of the best expositions of how arms dealing works, and you know, the finance aspects of arms dealing. At the moment, this thing with the American election, you see, and the getting to the bottom of what's really happening, you have to confront some really, really big worldview keystones, such as a belief in democracy, or that sort of thing doesn't happen here. And the instances where it's been proved to have happened, and there are plenty of, are so memory hold and brushed under the carpet that you always find yourself having to build the case from scratch, and that's why. And of course, that takes a long time, and the people who've done it either die out or run out of road in terms of financial wherewithal to do it. So, in a certain sense, resistance against the, you know, this, the idea that the rich man's world, resistance against that is quite difficult because it will peter out. And, you know, if you're up against the long game and they play a very long game, you've only really got a short game to counter it. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a pivotal time at the moment to really rub the salt in the wounds that are self-inflicted at key moments. Because at the moment, the belly of the beast is vulnerable because it's actually having to take big risks to push to take a leap forward with this great reset. And like I say, it's a question now of really rubbing salt in those wounds, which have to be open. You know, the defences have to come down as they advance into an attacking position. That, I mean, I feel slightly torn at the moment because obviously I'm you know, I want to get back into business, but at the same time, I would rather it with a rule book which I sign up to, as opposed to the rule book that I'm reluctant to sign up to. Like the Great Reset rule book, I don't want to sign up to that because I think it's tyrannical. And I frankly, I prefer Donald Trump's rule book. I think that he was like that. So, you know, and whilst I want to get on with it, because this stuff, and I think David found this, eventually it gets hugely boring. Once you've dug it out, it's really quite simple. Then you figure out, right, okay, what's the legitimate evidence which I think I can put up to support this set of facts arranged in this order. And that takes a bit of time. And once you get to that, it becomes, you know, it's basically a question of rinse and repeat, which gets really, really boring. And that's what, you know, what David said to me about his blog. He found he was just repeating himself. And I mean, my answer to that is, these days, I don't write a new blog very often. I just find the blog I've already written about it.
Yeah.
And you can update it, or you can put a couple of contexts together, then it's sort of, it's straight in your own mind. Other people, though, like the film, it's a rich man's game, have to do the history lesson. And the other person who said that to me too was Roy Madron, because I spent about 4 or 5 months working on his book, which still hasn't been published, doing the Super Smart Democracies YouTube channel.
What's it called? What's it called?
Super Smart Democracies. And I did a series of interviews with him and cut in film clips. I even made titles and stuff. I think it's very good. It's quite long, and it's not that long. But he's an ex-actor, and so he got all sort of artistic about it. And I sort of said, well, look, it's fine as it is, and as we did each one, it got a bit better. And then he wanted the first one to be as good as the last one, sort of thing. And you can go on like that forever. You have to get it in the can, edit it, and put it out. That's what you have to do. Yeah, in fact, I think he's still writing the book. I think he's one of he's got that kind of artistic temperament that it's never ready, it's never finished. It can always be improved upon, which is true. But no one ever gets to read it if you're forever improving it.
Well, obviously you're an entrepreneur, so I suppose, or at least that's one of the hats that you wear. And for example, I don't know, did I send you the audio that I did about 2 or 3 weeks ago? It's only about 2 minutes long. I'd been thinking about it, as I often think about many things, but because I had to go and meet somebody at lunchtime, I thought, fucking hell, I better get this out the door before I leave the house. So I kind of rushed it and did it.
Right.
Which is a rare example of me having an idea and then putting it out. Because I understand that whole paralysis. So I'm just trying. Yeah.
On that, you said about Rod Liddell when he sent off an article, he was pissed and they published it. Right?
It may not have been an article. It may have been, because in the Sun, he writes for the Sun on Thursdays. So sometimes it will be a tiny little box. It will be 30 words, 40 words. So he's just, it's almost the length of a tweet, and he's just smashing them out and sending them in.
Well, he wrote, he said that he's on a quest to find the most offensive right-wing fruit, and he wrote an article about quinces, which I haven't read, but just even as a headline, it's just so memorable. I mean,
which fruit did he say he was writing about? Quinces.
Yeah. Which is quinces are quite posh, I suppose, but it would qualify as a right wing fruit if you think all posh people are right wing.
But is he in a way, is he saying that the avocado is now a lost cause?
I haven't read it, so I don't know if he says that, but you can follow the argument. You see, in this Rich Man's Game film, at the end of it, it says, it quotes Orwell, and basically, if nothing is exclusive, you haven't got an elite, but they have to have their superiority somehow, and it sort of says about if everybody can fly away on holiday on EasyJet, that kind of diminishes the specialness of air travel. I mean, that's stretching a point. But on avocados, and particularly kiwi fruit as well, kiwi fruit, you get a slice on a drink if you went out to a posh nightclub now and again. And that, when I was growing up, if you had a slice of kiwi fruit, that was something special. Now they're selling them this huge punnet. Same with avocados. See, so when it becomes a monocultured crop, right, which is what they do, and then mass produced, it loses that cachet, right? Farm salmon is the same thing, wild salmon caught on a pot, you know, and farm salmon. It's really two different things. But the fact of farm salmon kind of diminishes in terms of, well, it's conspicuous consumption. You know, that's what's he called now? Can you remember his name? The economist that came up with the conspicuous consumption thing?
No.
18th and 19th century. Galbraith does a thing about talks about him in the Age of Uncertainty.
Okay.
His name escapes me. It'll come to me in a minute. But yeah, Veblen, Torsten Veblen.
Okay.
Come across Torsten Veblen?
I've heard of him.
He's very good.
Is he a sociologist?
Yes, and you know, he's the founder of a particular branch of economics too. But yes, I think he was a sociologist. Torsten Veblen. And he wrote a book about
suicide.
No. He wrote one about the upper classes. It was called something like, you know, he had a word for them. You know. Anyway, he wrote quite a famous book, the title of which I forget. But there is an episode dedicated to him in the Age of Uncertainty, and he's the one that coined the term conspicuous consumption.
Okay.
And he talks about the Hamptons and Rhode Island and all the big mansions, and there's a sequence in the film. Of course, David's father made that series with G.K. Galbraith, you see. And so there's some brilliant sort of...
sorry. The Age of Uncertainty is a film as well as a book.
Well, a BBC series, which is very good, which was produced by David's father.
Gosh. I remember reading The Great Crash when I was at university. I suppose we were in the middle of a bubble then. It was 1999. So it was obvious there was going to be a crash at some point because you know, people referred to crashes as happening in the past. So I remember reading The Great Crash by Galbraith, and there's some really funny bits in it because I didn't understand that you could have this thing called a select committee, because I didn't, you know, hadn't clocked that aspect of politics. And so congressional hearing. So he publishes excerpts from the transcripts of the congressional hearings on the crash, and he's talking about how Goldman Sachs did it. And they would basically say, yep, we'd do an IPO, make some money off that, and then afterwards we'd create a subsidiary from that firm and do an IPO of that, and we would just rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And they said, right, okay, how much was the stock of, you know, Goldman Sachs, you know, when you started doing this? And they said, oh, it was $150. And they said, how much is the stock of Goldman Sachs now? And they said $2.35. So it was just stark. It was almost like reading comedy. So that was probably the reason why, when the whole CDO CDS thing started to get talked about, and then it happened, it wasn't very difficult for me to understand exactly how. I didn't realize why it was so easy for me to understand that. I think it was probably because I'd read that excerpt from The Great Crash.
Probably. The thing is the rules of the game are not as published. That's the thing that people really don't get. If you assume that investing your own limited resources are the rules that everyone else is playing by, you're at a huge disadvantage. Because that's a subsidiary of the game. And the main game relies on people believing that that is the game, but that's not the game for them. And if you can issue credit and then buy at a discount when the other people are, you know, going up and down like crazy and they're all making theories about what they're doing and all the rest of it, if you're creating the credit, you can create the peaks and troughs. Markets are a series of controlled demolitions. You know, and then the useful idiots will build it back up again and put the pieces back together, right? And the job of the central banks and the large commercial money interest is to time the demolitions according to their own political requirements. And that is a perfect metaphor for markets, is a series of controlled demolitions whereby the person who writes the views and times the views are basically the money power. That's the money interest. It's as simple as that. And it works because people believe in the building back up bit of it. They think the process is building back up successfully. But it's owning the board. That, you know, it's basically it's like playing Monopoly. You know, you catch the banker cheating and throw over the board. But the next time you play the game, it's still the same bank and the same board. And the people happily settle down to playing the same game.
So what's your plan? Are you going to own the board?
Well, I'm a niche player. I mean, I'm a counter-cyclical guy. I mean, after the controlled demolition, my plan is to nip in, build something up, and, you know, basically build after the bottom is passed and sell before the ball is thrown over again. That's the sensible strategy.
Is that not the same as the people that you just criticised?
No,
well, when I say criticised, I mean you said there's the game, and then you said people believe in building back up. So are you saying that your strategy is building back up?
Well, the point
Except
is,
from a more knowledgeable perspective.
well, to survive in this game, you have to. Well, it's like the old that old show. You've got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to, you know, when to pull your gun. Yeah, you know. You know the song, the old Western song. You gotta know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away when the dealing's done. That one. Do you know,
I don't know it.
It's a great song. It's an old country and western song. You'll find it on the web. It's a great song. But that. Yeah.
Sure.
I've never learned it. I've never played that one. But, maybe I should. I might learn it today and record a song.
I see you getting quite into your country.
Oh, I love country music. I always have. I love country rock as well. Yeah.
Did your folks like it?
Oh, they like John Denver. I mean, my parents were that generation that really liked the English folk revival and stuff. So my dad was a huge Bert Jansch fan. And in fact, one of my dad's best mates in Germany was a very good guitar player, who in fact was at school with Alvin Stardust, a guy called Barry Bird. And Barry played in bands, and, you know, could have been. He played lots of bands in Hanover and stuff, and, you know, used to play in Hamburg when the Beatles were, you know, unknown and all that sort of thing. He used to work at the Raffles, which is the army supermarket chain. And they used to live 5 doors up from us. And Barry actually taught me the first few chords I learned on guitar. Yeah. There we are.
Yeah. So what about this weekend then? Are you going to be getting stuck into talking about the Great Reset, or
I'm not sure.
leave that for the others?
I was talking to one of my directors the other day, to mine, and what I just said about the rule book, right? The thing with modular and the inno concept, we've got an edge there which isn't going to go away that quickly, because I know that I'm quite a number of years ahead of the competition, figuring out how that shit works. But what I've figured out applies to building them and selling them to owner occupiers. Now, the thing about the Great Reset is the ultimate idea of that is that people don't have private property. So effectively, what my game plan, okay, will work for 2 cycles if Trump gets in, but it won't even work in the next cycle if Biden gets in, because
Why?
Effectively, it's clear that the current political landscape is that rent seeking is the order of the day, and what the one aspect of the moneyed interests want is they want people to be tenants. It's getting back to kind of a feudalism where people, and so the bill to rent people. My position is that in the current rule book, build to rent is a commercial decision, right? It may become a compulsion from on high or a diktat. Certainly, according to Agenda 2021, Agenda 2030, and the Great Reset, the idea of a debt jubilee, you give up private property, that's that, okay? Then you'd be doing build to rent. Like I said, I had a long chat with Mike about it yesterday. And what I said, I mean, we finished the call on a little, I said, with our concept, I said, what we might find ourselves doing is building the modular gulag. Because you can build anything with that process, and you build it quite cheaply. Whether people own them themselves and can build up that kind of security, and that's the game for them, which I would prefer, i.e. a homeowning democracy. That you can build a modular gulag as well as you can build a modular private housing. It's a building.
So you're talking about the technique.
The technique, whether you're building a prison or a hotel, is the same. You're still building.
Yeah.
Right? I would rather be building hotels and condominium than basically prisons and barracks. Right? So in the dystopian Great Reset, okay, it's barracks and prisons, right? I.e. people rent. So that's what I would call the modular gulag. So you can have the modular utopia, or the modular cornucopia, or the modular dystopia and the modular gulag. And so I'm thinking I might write something for the property press along those lines as a serious point about, are we a home-owning democracy? And I wrote on my commercial blog a while back when I was, I gave that short talk and took part in that webinar. I did tons of work for that and wrote a bunch of notes and stuff. And one of them is entitled, are we for a home-owning democracy, or are we just rent-seeking? And that's what that question is.
A rent-seeking banana republic.
Indeed, yeah.
That is. I mean, as you know, I do enjoy your combinations of expressions, but that one, that was one of the first ones that I remember seeing. It's not that long ago. It was probably only about 4 months ago.
It was in July. I think it might have been even in June.
Yeah, because we were talking quite a lot. Yeah, we were talking quite a lot. So you'd run me through some of your philosophy. So that was probably one of the other reasons why, when I saw that in my feed, it was like a real bolt, because you taught me through it over months and hours and blah de blah, but to see it all encapsulated in one like that made it much easier to travel as an idea.
Yeah, but I think that's where we're at, and the election in the States is tied up in all of that, very much so. The thing is, you see, Ranjan, is although I'm an anarchist, I have a lot in common with the libertarian ideas of business, not the anarcho-capitalist and the sort of the real sort of Platonist ideas of say a von Mises, or who's it, von Mises, and then there's the other guy they also Murray Rothbard. I mean, I've got a friend in Spain actually. He's an English teacher in Spain, and he's a big fan of Rothbard. And I got into this. I had quite a few discussions with him about 8 years ago about Rothbard and stuff. And I said, well, I have read him, and I said, and I've also read Plato's Republic. It's basically the same thing. And I said I can't sign up to this idea of letting children die, which is one of Rothbard's things. The exposure of the unfit. This is the other thing about this rich man's game thing. It does talk about Sparta and the Spartan attitude to child rearing, and also compulsory homosexuality, which is
quite right.
But because it talks about the skull and bones thing, and it talks about some of the hazing and initiation ceremonies.
So what's it called? Compulsory adulthood. What did you say? Compulsory what? Rich man.
Homosexuality.
No. What was the book called? The Rich Man's Game.
Oh, that was the film.
I never heard of
it. From JFK to 9/11, it's all a rich man's game. And
okay.
I've tweeted. I don't think I've tweeted a link to it, because the one big problem about the film, the turd in the punch bowl, if you like, of that film, is that it refers to people as devils and the Illuminati. I mean, the guy that makes the film is obviously quite an intelligent chap, but he doesn't do himself any favours. If he'd taken it up, he could have made all the same points, and they would be more powerful without that stuff in there.
What, he refers to devils?
Yes, he refers to them as devils and saying this is the devil's work and stuff.
Well, it's a bit like Ike likes to talk about lizards. I mean, I've never really listened to Ike much.
Well, that's what I mean about the turd in the punch bowl. It's
oh yeah, okay.
The point is that it is true that there are certain beliefs within, say, Freemasonry, or what they call the Illuminati, that it is a belief system and a worldview, and the best book on it actually is the book about Canaan, the Canaanites, the guy that did the Ezra Pound guy. The guy that
Eustace Mullins,
his book about the Canaanites. Okay, it's all in there, and it's by far the best exposition of all of that stuff.
Of what stuff? The lizards, the lizards and the devils.
All the Canaanite stuff, all the stuff about, the falls from grace, the, fallen angels, the Satanism, the occult stuff.
Oh, okay.
All of that stuff, is real as a belief system, right?
Right.
Okay, and that a group of people believe their own myths is real. The myths themselves don't have to be real. What's important is that people believing them and act upon those belief systems.
Right.
That's the point. But to make that point takes more than a 3.5 hour film. And if you make it casually, it becomes a turd in the punch bowl, which is why the turd in the punch bowl from David Icke's point of view is so destructive. Because if you do read his books or listen to him talking about it, some of it is anchored back into a body of it's written down now, but a lot of this stuff comes from oral cultures of history, passed down by.
Sure.
So yeah, it's the turd in the punch bowl element, but like I say, it's a film which, as long as you're aware, you can see the turd coming up and you can kind of take evasive action. In fact, it's quite funny. One of the things is talk about the lethal shots in the Kennedy assassination apparently came from the culvert in the road, from the thing, and they show someone walking through a sewer, which is a very apt sort of metaphor for the turd in the punch bowl, the guy wandering through a sewer.
So it's sort of like a bit of a googly. They're saying that the bullet came from a completely different source.
Well, no, the film says there are 8 snipers, okay, in the various buildings around Dealey Plaza, but there are also 2 shooters in the sewer system with the culvert. And this the shot coming from the culvert, that's not new news to me. I mean, I've watched this. I've never gone down that far down this rabbit hole. The details of it, but the background to it, as to why the mafia and the CIA wanted President Kennedy dead. I mean, that's really quite easy to get your head around, and most of the American public got their head around that pretty quick, even back in the day. That it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that Lee Harvey Oswald couldn't have done what he was accused of doing. And it wasn't so much the crime as the cover-up that became deep in absurdity.
Well, of course, this is the source of my comb over economics. The cover-up is worse than the crime.
Yeah, right. And well, it was there but that, wasn't it?
But can I ask you a quick question on this topic?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit more of a metaphysical one with some fecal metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in the inevitability of the turd in the punch bowl? And do you believe that there is any ambiguity in relation to the turd in the punch bowl?
Well, I think we have to sort of separate our categories of turds, and I think there are gatekeeping turds. I think there are controlled opposition turds, and there are probably, unintentional turds. I'd probably refer you to Maimonides and his 7 causes of contradiction in esoteric writing. And so, considering the esoteric turd, I think that Maimonides, with his guide for the perplexed on turds, would perhaps get you home on that one.
Oh my God! What can I say? I was quite proud of myself for the question, but you've really you've outdone yourself on the reply. That was it. So. Can we call that a turdish retort?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I think Roger and Ranjan on turds.
It's your turd. No, it's mine. I love it. Yeah, I remember when the mobile phone 3G auction was happening in the summer of 1999, when the economy was, like inflating and on heat and la-di-da. There was, because I was just learning about macroeconomics at the time. So somebody wrote a tiny piece saying you can understand the modern economy through mobile phones. And
Mm-hmm.
it basically said, it talked about a Keynesian policy for mobile phones, which is mobile phones for all. and a monetarist policy on mobile phones, which was controlling the mobile phone supply. And they were talking about a new currency called the Mobi and stuff like that. But our conversation about turds, I feel, is just as, if not more, illuminating.
Yeah. Well, you'll always find the absurd in the turd.
But I mean, the turd in the punch bowl, though, because you referred to Ike's turd in the punch bowl. And
well, I didn't refer to that. Alex Jones did. That's an Alex Jones line.
What, turd in the punch bowl?
Yeah, and specifically about David Icke and the Lizards. That's pure, straight out of Alex Jones. Yeah,
I had no idea.
You have to go back in the archive to find it. But yeah, that Alex Jones said that. So I can't. It was years ago, but I've never forgotten it because it's very, very apt.
Well, I mean, if at some point you can pinpoint the rough time, whether it be 2010 or before or whatever, I personally would be more than interested in hearing the exact sample of Alex Jones saying,
it's probably still searchable in DuckDuckGo or something.
yeah. Brilliant.
But where that comes from is that, I mean, it's almost like a survival strategy too, like David Shayler claiming to be Jesus.
Did he?
People. Oh God, yeah, he went through his whole that whole path of effectively, I think it's a survival tactic for some whistleblowers that they pretend to be mad. Yeah. Also, it's an attack tactic to a gatekeeper that's on road. You claim that they're mad, and it's sprinkling sufficient truth to hide the bigger truth. Is the other? It's a tactic of burying even worse news in some bad news, as it were. It's almost like an intellectual patsy. We're going to sacrifice this little bit of truth to guard this bigger secret. And turds in punch bowls kind of fit that bill.
Yeah, because when you say that in this film, Rich Man's Game or whatever, they refer to devils, or what's his name refers to lizards.
It doesn't do it a lot, but it's
no, but it's when it matters, isn't it? It matters when it does it.
For me, it was definitely a turd in the punch bowl. For other people, it may be the slice of kiwi fruit that makes it all worthwhile.
Well, I was going to say, one man's turd is another man's truth. One man's turd is another man's word.
Indeed. Yeah.
to extend the diarrhea.
Yeah.
But so Mullins, Ike, and this other guy.
As I say,
or even Pound, right?
When I read Mullins' book on the Canaanite thing, it's a green cover with green writing. Something Canaan. I forget the exact title.
You actually got it. You went and you found it.
I downloaded it off LibGen.
Right. Yeah.
If I want to read something, I can usually find it on there, so I'll download and read it.
Yeah.
Or in fact, that one may actually be on the Wayback Machine, because the Wayback Machine also has the Internet Archive attached to it, and there's quite a lot of books in the Internet Archive. The other place I think you can get these things on is Project Gutenberg. If they're out of copyright, there's all sorts of stuff you can.
Have you used the expression "turds all the way down" recently?
Not recently. It's yeah.
You have. You have used it.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago. Time's going by quite quickly. So,
Okay, yeah, because when you evolved from the turd in the punch bowl to turds all the way down, again, I'm not sure who you were talking to, but that really speaks to me.
that one was mine. I mean, that was a play on Bertrand Russell's anecdote about turds all the way down.
So it's
Um,
basically it's Alex Jones, David Icke, and Bertrand Russell giving it turds all the way down.
yeah,
Now,
with Eustace Mullins thrown in.
well, I mean, it's poetic. The thing is, I'm not sure. I feel because I can picture you coming up with a slogan, coming up with another slogan, or no, respecting a slogan, respecting another one, looking at the situation that we are in, and saying, well, this is the relevant slogan now.
Well, this is. I'm talking about the modular gulag, which is a big thing. I mean, when I came back from England a couple of weeks ago, I came back early. I
Yeah.
wrote some notes then, which I still haven't written up, and that was about tier 2 lockdown. Now it's full lockdown, right? Because there are a number of huge themes running through this, which are kind of an intersection of the main themes of the latter half of the 20th century, i.e., 1995 through to, say, 2010. And I did enumerate those themes. And one of the main themes is obviously climate change and this idea that capitalism just won't cut it going forward. Population control is another one. The rise and worship of elite is another one. But I got that idea of the direction, the long-term direction, actually from Carroll Quigley in Tragedy and Hope, because he talks about the main drive up to about 1963, and that book was published in 1968, so up to then. Now, since then, a lot of stuff has happened, not least the Nixon shock, which I still think that Nixon shock, OPEC, the spike in the price of oil, was really the kickoff of all this stuff. Then the next big catalyst was 9/11, right? So you've got, say, 75 to 2000, 2000 to now is roughly 50 years. So if you look back over those 50 years, okay, this is a bit of Edmund Burke now. It's 50 years behindhand. These present discontents, which was talking about the, rotten boroughs and, how bad Parliament had become when he made that speech. We're at the same place, I think. Certainly in terms of the British Parliament, and certainly in terms of what's happening in the United States at the moment, with the clear corruption going on in their election. So, but what Burke said about you can look back 50 years and you can be more objective, simply because to speak out at the time about the injustices of the time actually can cause you problems coming down the line because people are still there to get their own back, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So at this particular crossroads, we can triangulate some of the key sort of the keystones, and they are. I'll tell you what they are. They are the Nixon shock, the election of Bill Clinton, and the NAFTA and WTO stuff, then 9/11, then the Patriot Act, into 7/7. And you see, a step back from there is the assassination of Kennedy. Okay, the assassination of Kennedy. Kennedy famously beat Nixon in the 1960 election. Yeah, the LBJ, all of that. Well, this everything is a rich man's trick. Plot some of these keystones up to 9/11. Quite a lot has happened since 9/11. The other thing they say is the war in Afghanistan is about the poppycock and obviously the mafia and the CIA control the world drugs trade. Clinton plugs into that as well with the Air Force. So there's a very good clip of him being asked a question in the town hall about the Arkansas drug dealing. And Clinton looks at the woman asking the question and he sort of says, "No, Mum, they didn't tell me about that. I didn't know anything about that." That's all he says, It's like, not on my watch, nothing to do with me. I mean, there is stuff surrounding all of that stuff in which maybe he is implicated. I don't know, but it's interesting that's in the film.
So he's basically saying, yes, I'm completely in with the Arkansas Mafia. How the fuck do you think I got to where I am today? But I actually don't know anything about
that. Well, yeah. I mean, George Carlin said, "Listen, it's a great big fucking club, and you're not in
it." Yeah, and limited hangout. Yeah.
In fact, something I must have a look at is the Jimmy Dore show, because he's usually good on this stuff. Because he wrote a book, and the book was, your government just isn't into you. That's what his book was called. Which is that's the same as, I think that's a play on George Carlin's thing about, it's a great big fucking club and you're not in it.
Yeah, well, there was a film, there was a kind of chick lit book and a film called "He's Just Not That Into You."
Yeah,
so it's combining the two.
Yeah. He's a funny guy, Jimmy Dore. I really like him. But I haven't looked at his show recently to see what he's saying about the election, because he used to be on the Young Turks, and he's not on them anymore. I think he's kind of like a genuine progressive voice. I mean, he's an interesting. I like to say he's really funny too, so he's worth watching. But I haven't looked to see if he's still maintaining his objectivity. I suspect he is, and I'd be disappointed in the other one that's maintained his objectivity, a guy called Tim Pool. In fact, the fact that Jimmy Dore hasn't been coming up in my suggested viewing is a combination of two things. One, he's probably being kept out of my stream by the Google algorithm, but also because I haven't looked at one of his things recently, it's not serving up some of that stuff. So actually, I'm going to do that when we get off this call, see what comes up. Yeah. But anyway, I've got to go and roll myself another cigarette, grab another coffee, and like I say, I'm trying to figure out a strategy, what to do. But I don't think the election's going to be decided for a number of weeks. Not from what I've been seeing. I think we're going to have to wait. I don't think either of them is going to concede. And in fact, I don't actually think that Donald Trump should concede. I think the whole process needs to go through proper auditing, because there are too many questions.
What you're talking about, the vote, the mail-in voting?
Yeah, the US election. I think there's so much doubt cast on it now, and I think quite rightly that there's so much doubt cast on it. But if they're interested in continuing with the democratic process in the US, allowing free and fair elections, it's got to be looked at. And I do think when they do look at it, I think it will be even closer than it appears to be now. I think either of them could still win, but they have to do this process to find out who really did win on the legally cast votes.
When you say legally cast votes, what do you mean?
Well, there's evidence of some backdating. There's evidence of some ballot stuffing. There's a software glitch that's been found in the Michigan software, and it's the same software that's being used in Arizona and in Georgia, and
Is it owned by people who have campaigned for Hillary? I read something about that.
I think Nancy Pelosi's involved in the company. not about saying anything, but apparently there is a glitch in the software. Software has glitches. Hey, who knew? So you can identify a glitch in software that's doing something without turning it into some great conspiracy, if you like. But also, the other film I've watched, which is a very good film worth watching, is the what was it? The Plot Against the President or something. And it's a really good film, and it talks about the Russiagate scandals, and that whole process. Now, out of that process as well, there's a thing called the Lincoln Project, which
I've seen some stuff to do with them today.
Yeah, well, that supposed Republicans, or I think they're rhinos. This Republican in name only thing. Republicans in name only is what rhino stands for. I came up with a sobriquet, cunt, for conservative under narrow terms, which got me a Twitter ban for a little while.
Really?
Yeah, it's capital C dot. It's properly sort of punctuated. I basically said Theresa May was a cunt, a conservative under narrow terms, and it was my take on like the new wets. Remember Tory wets?
Yeah. So what? Did somebody complain?
Oh God, yeah. When I put that out, then I got banned from Twitter for a while for that. When it was in the 2017 election.
Were you replying to people with that?
I don't know. I really don't recall, Ranjan, but I put it up there, and I was more active in those days, and I had a much bigger audience back then, I think, in terms of my blog and what have you.
Because you took your blog down completely, didn't you? And then you redid it.
Yeah, I saved it, and then I put it back up from Blogger onto WordPress.
Are you on WordPress now?
Yeah.
Oh, right. How do you do? I mean, there are certain things that you do on your blog that I just think are brilliant. But do you use a theme, or do you do lots of editing?
No, I have a theme, but you have to use HTML, and it's HTML. It's a dead easy to use. I don't like it.
Yeah, because my theme, I chose it a while ago. I need to update it. But the thing is that I want to do more than my theme. I want to be able to sometimes.
Well, in WordPress, you can customize your own theme anyway, and just add in widgets.
Right.
So when you choose your theme, go back in, edit theme, keep the same theme, but put edit theme, and it will give you all the boxes that you can change.
Right.
And then it'll in the layouts it will say you can add widgets. So I add widgets in and stuff like that, but it's just drag and drop. It's very straightforward.
But don't you do HTML coding as well, a little bit?
Yeah, I mean HTML. There's no great. I mean it's really simple.
I know, but do you do it for your website?
Yes. But it's not difficult. I mean,
I've done it a bit, but do you do it to change the fonts, the size of the images, any of that stuff?
Sometimes, not always, but within a theme, that's really easy to do anyway. Generally speaking.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, I will let you carry on because I've had you for about an hour now, and yeah. What did you say you were doing again?
You had his birthday party this evening, so I'm going to.
Ah, okay.
And
Well, have a brilliant time tonight.
Okie dokie. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, then, Ranjan. Talking to you. Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Bye.